get started.
Hi, everybody. So we'll be covering a lot of information today, and at the end, we hope to leave you with some valuable information as well as some resources that you can go to whenever you have questions. In the future, overall, we'll cover some basic informations, and then we'll discuss Chapter 102 and Chapter 105, and then other program requirements.
Before jumping too far ahead into this, though, we need to take a minute to thank our partners. First, PACD, the Pennsylvania Association of Conservation Districts. They are our statewide umbrella who has funded this opportunity with funding from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. So they are the reason we're able to do this today. And lastly, thank you for being here. You're one of Allegheny County's 130 unique municipalities, and you're doing the on-the-ground work to improve our communities, so that we love that you are here with us today. So thank you.
Your hosts today, myself, Annie Fox, and Maureen Copeland. We are two of ACCD's 9 inspectors or resource conservationists, but you will see us in the field. I personally have a bachelor's degree in environmental resource management with a concentration in soil science. And I have additional experience in geotechnical testing methods and construction testing methods. Maureen has a master's in environmental science and management and a background in green stormwater infrastructure. Or organization's general information is above. If you wanted to call, go to our website, or just send an email to our generic email inbox.
So as Annie said, we are 2 of 9 inspectors. ACCD assigns our 9 inspectors to cover all 130 municipalities in the county. If you ever have questions about any of the information we cover today, or about any earth moving project you might have, you have an individual that's assigned to assist you. The contact email for these individuals is simply the first initial, last name at accdpa.org. I realize the map, some of the municipalities are super small, so feel free to, in the chat, you can say what municipality you're with if you don't know your inspector, and we can let you know who that is. You can see the 9 that we have. We have Abigail, Annie, Jess, Kaylin, Keith, Maria, Mackenzie, Matt, and myself. And if you ever forget, we have a contact page on our website. Just go to the contact page, drop a note, and we can get you to the right person. Please remember, our inspectors are covering a lot of ground. It's a big county, so we are in the field a few days a week. So if you reach out and don't hear from us right away, just give us a little bit of time, and we promise we do our best to get back to everyone.
Alrighty, before we get into the regulatory and program requirements, a lot of you probably know some of these, but we're going to go over some definitions. The first one is a stream. I'm sure plenty of you have an idea of what a stream looks like, but we're also going to consider anything that has a bed and bank with regular or intermittent flow as a stream. So think about stormwater ditches and channels. We also want to protect those similar to the way that we protect streams, because they'll flow downhill and eventually go into a stream. Next up is wetlands. The definition for a wetland is very specific. You have to have the right hydrology, you have to have the right plants, and you have to have the correct soil types to technically be a wetland. You can take a course on wetland delineation, is to identify wetlands in the field, but we're not going to go into all that detail. It's too much. So many municipalities have on their property wetlands or have encountered wetlands during projects. We just want to make sure that we protect them. They do provide critical habitats for wildlife and provide other water quality benefits. Next up, this is something most of you have hopefully heard of, is the NPDES, which stands for National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. It's a national permit program that's administered by the state with the goal of addressing water pollution by regulating point and non-point source pollution. Some industries regulated include animal feeding operations, industrial facilities, stormwater, and more.
Sorry, shouldn't put me in charge of controls. A couple more definitions. One, point source pollution. In simplified terms, it's what's coming out of a pipe, maybe from a factory or industrial center. You can trace the pollution back to a single point. So those are kind of easier to identify, and very much the opposite of non-point source pollution, which is the reason we're here today. And so non-point source pollution, again, being super simplified, is pollution that's carried by rain. Any of you that might have an MS4 permit for your municipality, the aim of that permit is to reduce non-point source pollution from fertilizers on lawns, salt on the road, sediment washed out of construction site. These are all non-point source pollution that we want to minimize. Another common source of non-point source pollution is from agricultural sites.
Great. So some more definitions that will kind of guide you through the regulatory requirements that we're going to talk about. The first of which is erosion, which is a naturally occurring process where wind, water, and freeze thaw cycles can wear away the land. Some of the great land features out west, like the Grand Canyon or Bryce Canyon, were formed by erosion. Those ones more specifically by wind and water erosion. Accelerated erosion is what happens when humans and animals expose soil to the elements and cause it to wear away more quickly. Sedimentation is when soil particles that have been eroded accumulate in and around streams or water resources, including wetlands. Just an interesting fact is that sediment pollution is the single most common source of pollution in US waters. Approximately 30% of that is caused by natural erosion. The remaining 70% is caused by human activity. Construction activity is the most common source of sediment pollution. According to US EPA, sediment pollution causes approximately $16 billion in environmental damage annually. Now that we're through with all those definitions, hopefully we kept them easy enough for you and not too painful. We'll move on to our actual material, the reason we're here today, sediment pollution.
So you heard about the high price value of sediment pollution, which kind of crazy, right? Like sediment is dirt is natural is good. But as Annie said, the sediment pollution can come from accelerated erosion. And that's really what we're talking about when humans cause just this excess of sediment. And it's in excess of natural conditions and can really have long-term impacts on the stream. Some examples, it can cloud the water and block light. So animals have a harder time finding their food source. Aquatic plants can't get the light they need to grow. It can settle on stream bottoms. And for any fisher people out there, that can really impact aquatic insects, smothering insect larvae, smothering fish eggs, destroy spawning areas for fish. In worst case scenarios, it can even clog the fish gills, which is really damaging. Pictured in the middle is the PA state amphibian and my personal favorite amphibian. I think they're so adorable. This is the hellbender. Hellbenders thrive really in clear rocky bottom streams. High sediment added to those clear rocky bottoms really prevents these. They're like super thin, like long animals. It prevents them from being able to burrow their thin bodies between rocks. And that's where they prefer to stay. So sediment damage can do a lot of damage to these animals as well. In addition to the effects on the animals and the plants, sediments can also fill the waterways and reduce water depths. So any boaters out there, makes kayaking more challenging, boating more challenging, but also can increase flooding potential because the carrying capacity of the stream, how much stream can handle, is reduced. And lastly, I didn't realize this, but sediment has physical properties. It can really hold on to chemical compounds pretty well, and some of those compounds can be toxic compounds. So sediment does a really good job of delivering those toxic compounds into our waterways. So all in all, bad thing. We try to prevent that from happening. And how do we prevent that? Well, so ACCD does this through a couple different ways. And we're going to go a little bit more in depth about our programs here that prevent sediment into the waterways, including the ways it might impact you. So first one is Chapter 105. And so Chapter 105, ACCD has regulatory authority through an agreement with Pennsylvania DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, to operate portions of the Dam Safety and Waterway Management Program, aka Chapter 105, way easier to say, 105. This program regulates any object built in or adjacent to stream, floodway, wetlands, or other water bodies. So some examples of things that might be built around a stream could be like bridges, culverts. If you ever want to fill in a wetland, that's going to be regulated by 105. Sewer lines through streams, it's regulated. Stream bank stabilization, roads, docks, and a whole lot more. So we're going to get into a bit of this. So first off, kind of rule of thumb of Chapter 105, we really want to protect the streams and wetlands we have. So we do limit what can be done around them. So first off, the state guidelines state that no work should occur within the floodway of a stream without a permit. Floodway, it's a technical thing. We probably should have given a definition of that, but basically it is either shown on a FEMA map, or if there's no FEMA mapping for that stream, it's 50 feet from bank out. So either side of the stream is 50 feet away. You can see on the screen here, this is a Sawmill Run FEMA mapping. And down below here, the FEMA map of the floodway is basically the stream. You just have to stay out of the stream if you're doing work. But up above, it gets a little more complicated, and that floodway goes outside of the stream bed. So it's really important to know like where you're working and what the regulations are for these different areas. Like I said, some of these smaller streams don't have FEMA mapping. So a good rule of thumb is just to stay 50 feet away from a stream. If you don't know if it's FEMA mapped or not, just 50 feet away. Another rule of thumb is no dredging or construction equipment in the stream. We realize, sediment builds up in streams. That's a problem, but dredging is a short-term solution and really doesn't have lasting impacts. So without a permit, there's typically no dredging allowed in streams. We also want to protect our wetlands. So typically without a permit, we're not to do any work in a wetland. And all of these activities that I mentioned above that we're not to do without a permit, you need a permit, and each permit will have to have an E&S plan, which we'll get into later today. All right. So that was horrible. Here are the things you can't do in a stream. But so some of the things you can do, routine maintenance. So if you do have a culvert that's already permitted, you're allowed to maintain around that culvert. So within 50 feet of an existing structure, you can kind of keep that area clear so sediment doesn't back up and take out a bridge, take out a road, etc. Cleaning up trash is always allowed. That's a great activity to do in a stream. If you have a downed tree and you have equipment from the edge of the stream, you can remove that tree from the stream. Just can't get equipment in the stream. And planting native trees along the stream bank is always a great activity to do. No permit needed for that. The whys, we've already gone through a lot of it. Sedimentations can destroy our streams. We want to protect the things we care about. Negatively impacting streams, floodways, wetlands, increases flooding. I don't know how many of you have seen like streams in our neighborhoods that have culverts over them that are way too small. So things flood, the culverts will get backed up, waters will go over it. Maybe they'll wash out the roads beside the culvert. We've seen this happen. Just kind of some of the examples of why we need to protect our streams so much. Some types of permits, there's a bunch of Chapter 105. Some we deal with at our own office at ACCD. Some go to DEP, Army Corps of Engineers, etc. So the ones that we review in our office are called general permits. They're more streamlined and they're for very specific items, but they're for items that you tend to see often. Some that we see municipalities applying for might be the GP3. So this is a stream bank restoration. Any of you that are doing MS4 projects on stream banks, a GP3 is a very common one that you might apply for. So regrading stream banks, planting them, maybe some sort of riprap or other item to put on the stream bank to protect it. A GP4 is for an outfall structure. So if you have a stormwater system in your municipality, you need to get that stormwater to a stream. That requires an outfall in the stream. That would be a GP4. GP5 is for utility crossings. GP7 and GP8 are for road crossing, either temporary or small road crossings. So those might be some that you would have to deal with in our office. Joint permits, emergency permits, and dam permits are all handled by DEP, or dam permits are handled by DEP in the central office. Those kind of go up the ladder a couple of times. And U.S. Army Corps will review some permits, some GPs, some joint permits. So they are also involved in the reviewing of permits. So say you're in a municipality, landslide happens, takes out a stream, covers it over. That's kind of critical. Or maybe you have a sewer pipe that goes through a stream and you realize the sewer is leaking. We don't want that to happen. Some of these things need to happen on a quicker time frame. And these can be permitted as an emergency emergency 105 permit. We don't handle those at our office. Those are things handled by DEP, but just know that, some of these more drastic events can be handled a little bit more quickly. There's a phone number right there on the screen that you can call if you need to do that. You get your emergency permit and you have to follow up with a regular permit, whether a general permit, a joint permit, some sort of 105 permit. So you do want to make sure you're following conditions of these permits. Otherwise, you might get kind of stuck on the end and have to redo some work. But just know that option there and available if you need it. All right, so quizzes, nothing too hard. Let me pull it up. We are going to launch quiz. We're going to take a few minutes to do a quiz. After we finish, we'll take a short, 5-minute break. Let's all be back at our computer at 11:30. Get some coffee, get some water after you do your quiz, and stretch your legs. All right, y'all. As folks are coming back in, go over the quiz. Y'all did really well. Good job. So the first one was a bit of a gimme, but yes, your local ACCD inspector is the best person to contact should you have any questions about our organization or about the work you're doing and how it impacts our streams. What causes sediment pollution? Yeah, there's a lot of reasons sediment pollution can occur. If you don't, we haven't really gotten over a lot of this, so you guys are way ahead of the game. Failure to use erosion and sediment controls or to maintain them. If you don't install stormwater BMPs on a project, that excess amount of stormwater can cause erosion. Quads blazing trails through woods, they do indeed cause erosion. So all of the above is a decent answer. Chapter 105 regulates streams, wetlands, and dams. Great job. ACCD can provide you with information on 105 emergency permits, and we will review if you have to apply for a general permit after. But yes, PADEP is the one who is going to be issuing the actual emergency permit. And erosion is a natural process. Yes, humans tend to speed it up, but all in all, it is something that happens even without us there. So great job, y'all. And we did get a great question in about the definition of a floodway and how it's different than a floodplain. So I'm going to go ahead and answer that before we roll off the 105 topic. And the answer is that a floodway is the channel of the water course and the adjoining area, which can reasonably required to carry and discharge 100-year flood. So we get a 100-year flood, the area in the channel and next to the channel that would carry that flood. And so there is, like I said, the FEMA mapping. Some streams are mapped and show those areas. That's kind of if it's not FEMA mapped, we go into the assumed 50 feet, unless you have an engineer or you are an engineer and you can show the hydraulics of that stream and can show that the 100-year stream is this 100-year flood is this big, the stream is this big. This is how much land would be required to carry that 100-year flood. So that is the floodway, and that is regulated by the state. Floodplain is not regulated by the state. That tends to get more into municipalities codes. And the floodplain is simply the area next to the stream. It doesn't have quite as technical of a definition. It may be expected to be inundated in a 100-year flood, but that's kind of it. So I hope that answers your question. More questions, bring them in. But at this time, we are going to roll on. If I can find, yes, all right. Break time. And I'm going to let Annie take control and talk about 102.
You guys get to hear me talk for a while, and hopefully I don't talk too fast. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A and we will try to answer them. If we don't hit them during our discussion, we'll get them all at the end. So the second main way to prevent non-point source pollution is kind of what chapter 102 is all about. Earth moving activities during construction cause sediment to flow into streams, rivers, and storm sewers. As we already mentioned, this is a type of pollution that negatively impacts people, animals, aquatic life. Sediment also contributes to flooding, alters stream flow, causing erosion and property loss. So to keep pollutants away from streams, ACCD has regulatory authority through an agreement with PADEP to operate Chapter 102. Chapter 102 is Pennsylvania's Erosion and Sediment Pollution Control Program. Handle that here in Allegheny County. We work with municipalities in the construction industry to ensure required best practices are used to keep soil where it belongs, which is on land, out of our streams, out of our rivers. So just like we had with chapter 105, here are some chapter 102 rules of thumb. Regardless of the size of your project, you should still always use ENS controls. So, if you're just working on a really small sewer project in the street, you're going to have some spoils that come out of the trenches, and you should still use ENS controls. Activities over 5,000 square feet of earth disturbance are required to have a written erosion and sediment pollution control plan. And activities with an acre or more of earth disturbance require NPDES permit coverage. There are a few exceptions to this rule. Timber harvest projects and road maintenance projects don't require an ENS permit till the earth disturbance is over 25 acres. This for timber harvest isn't the entire area of the timber harvest. It's the areas that you add up, including the haul roads, skid roads, and landings, areas that will be completely cleared and grubbed for support activity. Oil and gas activities don't require ENS permitting until 5 acres or more of earth disturbance. And these are not your typical distribution lines, think bigger transmission projects. There are definitely fewer types of Chapter 102 permits, so we don't have as many to go through. The types of plans we review at ACCD include NPDES permits for sites that have more than 1 acre of earth disturbance, non-NPDES erosion and sediment pollution control plan for sites that are under an acre, timber harvest ENS plans, amendments and renewals to NPDES permits, and corrective action plans. A corrective action plan is what you end up with if a project goes from start to finish and never had a permit, or if it had a permit and it expired and the site still isn't in compliance and they have to make some changes. Non-NPDES ENS plan reviews for sites less than an acre are not always required. We can request them to be submitted for review if we get a complaint and go out and see that a site's in really bad shape. Maybe the ENS controls that are implemented aren't sufficient. And some municipalities do require district approval of their ENS plans for some of their other permit requirements. Alrighty. So what's the purpose of all of this again? We want to reduce pollution into our waterways. We want to minimize the potential for erosion and sedimentation. NPDES permitting allows for the management of post-construction stormwater, which reduces both pollution and flooding as projects are completed. And finally, protection and restoration of water quality is important for all the same reasons we discussed earlier regarding, habitat improvement and maintenance. This is a lot of words, but we're going to go into the components of what goes into an ENS plan. Typically, we would have an ENS narrative that usually contains mapping, soils information, supporting ENS calculations, some other supporting information that might need to be included. On the drawings, we would typically see topo information, grading information, the proposed site improvements, the limit of disturbance, soils information, drainage areas and mapping, construction sequence, measures for recycling and disposing of materials that shouldn't be buried on a site. And then, of course, locations where we see your ENS controls. For NPDES permits, in addition to the ENS plan requirements, we would see post-construction stormwater plans and calculations. It's important to note that all these plans should be developed by someone with training and experience in SPMP design. So we'll go through some pictures of things that you'd see out in the field. Hopefully this is familiar to most of you, and if not, hopefully you'll have something to leave here with that you can find useful. So some of the more common ENS PMPs that you would see. On the left-hand side, we have a rock construction entrance. These knock the mud off of tires when trucks drive over them. It leaves the sediment on the site rather than dragging it to the street and into catch basins and inlets along the road. These should be a minimum of 50 feet. There's other requirements if you're in a high quality watershed, but we're not going to go into all that detail today. There's also for sites where they don't want to rip up existing pavement, there are prefab entrances that can be purchased that are typically made out of plastic. Same thing, they require approximately 50 feet in length or equivalent to 4 tire rotations of the truck leaving the site. And most of that can be found in the manufacturer specifications for those. And then on the right-hand side in the middle, you see 2 different kinds of inlet protection. Inlets carry water streams eventually, so it's important to keep sediment out of them, keep them from getting clogged. So in the middle, you see an inlet bag. These are a little bit older and more standard, and I'm sure most of you have seen these over time. The biggest issue with these is they need to be maintained. Sometimes they'll get so full that they can collapse, or they get so full that when you go to take them out to maintain them, they're too heavy and they tear. So maintenance on these is crucial. On the right-hand side, you'll see an inlet mat, which is a newer product. There are many variations of this. Different manufacturers come up with them. They are approved by DEP. The upside is they're pretty easy to install. They're pretty easy to maintain. They're magnetic, so they stick to the catch basins, which is fantastic. The downside is they get driven over and have to be replaced frequently. I've also seen issues where if they're installed on a steep slope on a road, they have a tendency to move a little bit. Some more examples. They do work. On the left-hand side, you see a compost filter sock trap, which is triple stacked compost filter sock. This particular one, you can see that water carried sediment down towards the sock. It rose to the level of the top sock. And it's hard to tell in this picture, but out in the field, you can see that the sediment stopped at the top of the sock. So nothing was discharged from this point on the site. So just a maintenance on this BMP is that the sediment should be cleaned out when it reaches half the height of the sock, which is the same for inlet bags, by the way. I should have mentioned that on the last slide. Clean them out when they're half full. In the middle here, you'll see silt fence, which is older, more traditional, but it does seem like a lot of places are moving away from it. Silt fence isn't sufficient for installation on paved areas because it can't be trenched in. And often enough, even in areas where it could be trenched in, it's not installed correctly anyways. If silt fence isn't trenched in properly, water with sediment can just go right underneath it and defeat the purpose of the whole thing. On the right-hand side, you see a temporary riser in a sediment basin. This one appears to have been freshly installed. There's straw matting on the slopes of the basin. On the permanent concrete structure on the photo on the right, you can see plywood over the orifices is blocking them off, which will force water to go through the perforations in this temporary metal riser. That allows time for some sediment to settle out, which prevents it from getting into the catch basin and being discharged from the site. Typically, we don't expect water to be crystal clear coming out of these, but it's usually significantly better than what's floating around in the bottom of the basin. Typically, projects that need sediment basin are going to be larger, potentially larger than 5 acres in site size. So for municipal projects, you may or may not see these.
Muted. Thanks, Annie. Yes, 102 is super important. We spend a lot of our time on those projects. So as you have questions, feel free to chat them, Q&A them at us. We do have 3 more programs at ACCD that help prevent non-point source pollution. They're not the programs that Annie and I handle. So we're going to just talk about them briefly and provide you with contact information for one of our colleagues. The first is the DGLVR, Dirt Gravel Low Volume Road Program. It It's a program that provides education, technical assistance, and funding to improve roads and subsequently the landscape around them. Each year, projects are funded that promote, cost-effective, environmentally sound practices to correct pollution and improve safety on these roads. Dirt and gravel roads are pretty obvious what those are, but for low volume road, there is a definition there. 500 cars per day or fewer, measured only on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday between March 1st and a week before Thanksgiving. So you missed your deadline for measuring that, I think, as of today or something. But anyway, these are a great resource for municipalities that have roads that maybe are giving you some trouble with pollution. Riley Kinney from our office is the one who organizes this and the next two. Her email is on the next slide.
All right, next up is our nutrient management program, which is covered under Act 38. The district works locally with farmers, doing required annual inspections, funding assistance, and plan reviews to keep operations in compliance under the Nutrient Management Act. These are for concentrated animal operations, which are farms who exceed 2 animal equivalent units per acre, but not less than 8 animal equivalent units. Sorry, that's confusing. And again, Riley's information is at the bottom of these last 2 slides.
Yes. And this last one is the Chapter 91. It's the manure management program. Again, this is for farmers who are handling manure. We want to make sure that's handled correctly to prevent nutrient runoff from entering groundwater or surface water. It is a program that's regulated by the DEP as part of the Pennsylvania Clean Streams Law. Manure management plans are required for all small-scale livestock owner. Even properties with chickens, like if you have backyard chickens, those do require manure management plans. Plans are simple, they're free to develop, and Riley can obviously help you with those. Additionally, farms that cultivate 5,000 square feet or more are required to have written agriculture ENS plans, erosion and sediment control plans. So similar to construction sites, if you have a farm that has 5,000 square feet or more, you need a plan to tell us how you're going to keep that pollution out of the streams. So again, Riley's information is there. She's great. She can help you out. So contact her. Annie and I cannot help you on those last 2 ones. Sorry.
I do know that the cutoff is like 1 chicken. So if you have 1 chicken, you need a
1 chicken.
Plan. Yep.
Wow. All right. So another short quiz. And then we do have a last portion of our presentation. So don't go away after the quiz. We'll take like 2 minutes to do the quiz. All right, I'm going to give, it looks like we're pretty much done with the quiz. So I'm going to go ahead and end it and share. You guys are really great. So yes, ways that non-point source pollution can be prevented using ENS controls like rock construction entrances, compost filter socks, those kind of things are great ways to prevent pollution. Checking to see if a permit's needed. We spend all of our days like looking at sites and reviewing permits. And so we can always provide some assistance to like help you kind of think through your permit a little more and guide you if more areas need some ENS controls. Sadly, getting lunch is not a way to prevent pollution. Maintaining stormwater and stream facilities in your municipality, that's a great way to prevent pollution. I really wish I could go for a dozer ride. That sounds fun. Examples of ENS BMPs, compost filter socks, vegetation. There is a great statistic. Something like the speed of a raindrop is like 19 miles per hour when it hits the ground. So vegetation helps prevent that raindrop from washing the dirt away. It's great ENS BMP. In fact, I feel like that's often one that I'm just like telling contractors, get things vegetated, because that's a great way to handle it. Gabion baskets can be a great ENS BMP. Rain garden and French drains are going to be more for controlling stormwater, which if you don't have controlled stormwater, that is an issue. But they tend to be more stormwater BMPs.
And groundwater.
And groundwater. Thanks, Annie. ENS controls is to protect water quality. 100% true. What is the purpose of permitting stream obstructions and encroachments? All of those answers are great ones. Protect life and property, prevent pollution, maintain stream carrying capacity. So great job, y'all. And then we did get another question. For Chapter 105 permit, what distinguishes between general permit and joint permit? General permits are very specific about what they can cover. So if you are putting for example, GP5 is for utility crossing, it's very specific. It has to be a certain diameter pipe that's going under the ground. It has to be covered so much by dirt before we hit stream bottom. They're very specific in what you can get permitted. If you're outside those permit conditions, say your pipe is just too big, that goes to a joint permit. Joint permits have conditions that go with them, but they're set by the DEP. So that's a great question. And hopefully between Annie and I, we answered that question for you. All right. Last little bit of presentation and we'll hopefully get you guys out of here soon. Go ahead, Annie, take it away.
All right, this section is all about enforcement and achieving voluntary compliance or not. The district is level 3 delegated with the state for ENS purposes, Chapter 102, meaning we have the ability to assess compliance and proceed with enforcement. But let me be very clear in that this is not something that we want to do. We like to achieve voluntary compliance. We like to work with municipalities, contractors, and other entities to just resolve problems on a site. The enforcement aspect of our jobs is like a last resort. So just keep that in mind as we talk about this. We do find it a lot easier and beneficial to work with everybody to achieve voluntary compliance. Should you receive a compliance notice or notice of violation from one of the ACCD staff members, it's best practice to work with your inspector to resolve the issues on the site. There's a good chance that if you receive a compliance notice or an NOV, if you already had a permit, then you know who to talk to, and you probably already received an inspection report with some recommendations. If you're receiving one right off the bat, there's a good chance that you should have a permit and you don't. But we're happy to work with you. These are typically for violations related to ENS controls. So failure to maintain something or just failure to install a BMP to begin with. and likely you have sediment pollution leaving the site and going directly into a stream. So for violations related to Chapter 105, say we come up to a site and we watch you digging into a stream, we work with DEP for enforcement where needed.
And so to give you kind of our process, like Annie said, we want voluntary compliance. And so how we achieve that is first, we're going to come out to site. We need to see what's going on, either, just a general inspection, or if we get a complaint. If we get a complaint, we have to come out to a site within 8 days. That's kind of our guidelines, that kind of the rules we have to follow. So we'll come out. Best case scenario, we walk the site with someone who's in charge or in construction manager. Maybe it's a DPW if it's a municipal project. And we want to hear what you're doing, what you're thinking, like walk the site with us. We'll talk about issues we might see and kind of talk through possible solutions as well. If we find a violation, we'll always follow up with an inspection report that's going to outline very clearly what those violations might be. Maybe maintenance wasn't done, maybe a control wasn't put in as it should have been. And we'll give you suggestions on how to improve and come into compliance. After that report, we give you some time to do it. We're not like gonna ask that you magically make everything happen overnight. We know that's not realistic. So we'll give you, some time, come out back, re-inspect. Again, we like to walk the site with you. If everything's great, awesome. That's the perfect scenario. If it's not, maybe we go through that again. If nothing's been done, then we might get into like a compliance notice or a notice of violation territory. Where we, again, send out another inspection report, list out what we think the best ways to handle things are. And so we hope we never get to the notice of violation point. If we do, again, we're going to give you another chance, come back out and inspect it, and hope that things are fixed. Those last 6 and 7, like Annie said, we don't want to get to that point. We want to work with you and try to get everything cleaned up for the health of the stream. We're not coming out just because we like to, tell you what to do or any of that stuff. Like, we're doing it for the good of the stream and for the good of the environment. Like I said, if we receive a complaint, we are required to get out and inspect the complaint within 8 days. The process is the exact same, what's outlined on the screen there. Like Annie says, sometimes we'll find a site that's over an acre and is working without a permit. We will, in our inspection report, request that the site is stabilized and that work is stopped until a permit is received. So if that's the case, that's a huge chunk of time that you're going to have to stop working and go through the lengthy process of getting a permit. So it's always best just from the get-go to make sure you have all the permits you need. Some other entities that you might see out in the field that kind of works hand in hand with us or do their own thing. So U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has inspectors as well for streams, mostly streams and rivers. DEP has their own crew of inspectors. Fish and Boat Commission is out there for streams. And then obviously local municipalities and Allegheny County have their own regulations and things that they look for. If we do get to that civil penalty assessment, just to give you an idea, we recently had a project where you can fine up to like $1,000 per violation per day. And they had to pay in excess of $90,000. So not something that you want to see. And like I said, we don't like to see it either. So, but just a heads up it can come down to that.
We did have a question that came up, Maureen, about if civil penalties are assessed by the district or if they are assessed by DEP. And I did put this in the chat, but typically for Chapter 102 E&S violations, compliance problems, they're assessed jointly. So we'll go through all of our inspections and findings and measures that gets the site back into compliance with DEP. They kind of guide us through the process, and then the final, I'm not going to call it an order, but the final assessment would be issued by DEP. The funds that are received from civil penalties, the district doesn't receive those. All we get back is our cost recovery, which would be like mileage, time spent during meetings, time spent writing reports, time spent doing inspections if we had to go out a bunch of times. But the civil penalty money itself goes to the state, goes to a fund. For Chapter 105, the penalties are assessed by the state only, so the region probably work on that. I could see them using our inspection reports to guide the initial part of that process, but typically, if something's going to be 105 enforcement, you'll see a DEP inspector come out to the site several times. I don't think I've ever been around for a 105 enforcement case. Been around for a few 102, and those all settled without going into court or having to deal with lawyers. Oh, and this is my slide, so I can just keep talking. So we did cover a lot of ground today, and I don't want to scare anybody with the enforcement stuff. So let's get back to the reason we're here, is that we are here to help you. We want to guide you to prevent pollution. We want to guide you to use ENS controls, maintain stormwater facilities. So hopefully this isn't the end of our interactions. I see a few names that I recognize the attendees here. I'm sure Maureen does too. So for those of you, thank you for coming. And if you don't know who your inspector is, let us know so that we can get you in touch with them. I'm going off script here. It's probably like what you do. So we wanted to go through some other resources aside from ourselves that can help you when you have questions. Maureen, are you going to share your screen and start with the ACCD website? Our website is just accdpa.org. What happened to it? Okay, there we go. So from here, you can file a complaint, which is just easy peasy at the top of the screen. There's a big button for you. You submit your complaint information, the location of it, and this should go straight to the inspector for that area. Complainant information is kept confidential. So, you know, whether it's you're complaining about a neighbor, they're not going to find out who you are. If you're complaining about your employer, they are not going to know. That is all kept private. And yeah, we don't give out your information. Next up, we offer workshops, webinars like the one you're attending today, and other education resources. That's under the Learn tab on our website. So there are some recorded things in there, and you can also see upcoming events. So there's plenty of fun stuff in there. I know that plenty of you also signed up for that 105 and DGLDR grant program webinar that's coming up. Kept getting notifications about that. In addition to that, we have some resources on here. Common deficiencies, example forms, all sorts of fun stuff. Some are recorded webinars. I think some are just some fact sheets. I think we have some more things that might be posted on here in the future that you can reference. So just another place to go if you have questions. Alrighty. In addition to our website, DEP also offers some great resources. Their website wasn't working this morning, and it looks like it's still down. So that's sometimes what happens. But they do offer the ENS BMP manual, the erosion and sediment pollution manual. In here, you can find information about pretty much all of the approved ENS controls, their typical details, maintenance instructions, all sorts of fun stuff there. Typically, when somebody develops a plan, they'll use the details and information from the manual, which is what we like to see. There's also information in there about design calculations for E&S controls. So there's plenty of information there. Everything else there's a 105 resource that is the stream booklet. DEP developed this a long time ago. It's really good to hand out to people that come with general questions about what they can do in a stream. It's user-friendly, easy to read. It's pretty intuitive. You can always reference this. It's available. I think we have a link on our website. I think we were going to email this one out too, right? So that's it. There's also the PA stormwater manual. We didn't put that on there because we're mostly talking about E&S controls today. But if you do have a rain garden or something in your municipality and you aren't sure what the typical maintenance should look like, that information is in the stormwater manual. Sorry, Mo, if you're going to try to bring that up. All right. So the only resource we couldn't actually show you is the DEP E&S resources webpage. If you get a chance, we can send the link out. Hopefully it'll work later, but there's additional information on there. There are alternative approved E&S BMPs on there, and that includes the inlet mats because they're newer than the manual. Were approved after the manual came out. There's a few other E&S controls that are on there. There's also some FAQ documents, some cool stuff on there. So this webinar that we talked about today, we will be hosting again in January and then again in March. So if there are others from your municipality that you think would benefit, just let them know. We'll be doing another one. We'll send out an email blast where they can check our website, enroll for one of those. We also hold an annual E&S workshop. Pre-COVID, we did this in person. And since COVID, we've been doing this virtually, like one webinar a week, typically in February. So our next one coming up is February 2023. I believe there should be information. I don't think it's up yet, but soon it will be on our website as well. And then last, but definitely not least, your inspector for wherever your municipality is can be a great resource. Even if you're just having trouble finding a document that you want to refer to, you can call us and let us know. For some reason, coworkers think I'm like a human encyclopedia, know where to find things. And we can also provide technical assistance, come and look at something in the field, assist you on inspecting a site in your area if you're unsure if it's in compliance, or respond to complaints.
Real quick, before you sign off, there is a Zoom will do a pop-up when you close out this webinar of a survey. Please fill that out. Definitely help us improve. We're looking to, be a resource for you. So we want to know what we can do better. It will also have, if you signed up with the municipal web's email address, then we will be sending you a continuing education credit certificate to your municipalities. But if you use like an AOL or Comcast email address, we don't have your physical address. So if you want that certificate, be sure to tell us that in the survey. And with that, thank you so much for coming. Anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand, put them in the Q&A. We'd love to help you out. We realize we're a little over time. Apologies, but hopefully you found this useful. And yes, thank you. I'll stop now. Feel free to raise your hand or put something in the Q&A. Or just sign off if we answered all of your questions perfectly. All right. I don't know. Annie, it looks like we're good. Cool. Well, thank you all for attending. Feel free to reach out after the fact. We have